Hey guys, welcome to another weekly focus. So I'm just going to show you guys what I had this week and some of the trades I had from last week as well. So let's look at this. I'm going to start first with gold. So I had this buys on gold, I think right here. So I think I mentioned this last week. I had this buys on gold and I was expecting prices to take out this area, and so we could test an area like 2800, which was the psychological level right here. So I was expecting a move like this. So I'm going to show you how I managed this. Once price started moving, I had my stops to break even and stuff like this. Once we had this move, I brought my stops to break even, and eventually I closed this at 0.5%. So once we had price coming back down, we had a break of this this trend line. I had to close this at plus 0.5%. Let's look at US30. I'm going to be a little bit fast today because I did the record before and I just didn't put the sound thing, so the sound wasn't there, so I'm doing this all over again. So I'm going to be a little bit too fast. So let's look at this. So I had the buys on US30 and this didn't play out as expected. So we had this move to the upside, we had this slow move. I was expecting prices to take off from here and this didn't play out, so I took -1 on US30. Let's look at NAS100. So I had the buys on NAS100 as well. Another impulse move, inability for prices to play out. I was expecting prices to move and test 2200 or 22,000. I'm going to show you the trade management here. So currently I have, after this impulsive move and this inability for prices to come down, I had my stops move to break even. So I'm still holding this position on NAS, but when you look at this compared to the S&P500, I had the same move on the S&P 500, impulse, sells, inability around this area, looking for these buys as well. So the buys came in on the S&P 500 and I moved my stops as well to break even. Same thing with what happened to NAS100, but then price took me out. So price just reversed and took me out. So on this one I have a break even on S&P. I still have my NAS position running and I have the gold one closed at 0.5%. So that's it for the trade recap, and let's have a look at the positions, or let's have a look at the pairs for this week. So we're starting with the DXY and we're looking at this from the daily time frame. So the first thing we're looking at is the moves this pair is making. So we had an impulsive move, we had a consolidation, we had a pivot point set. So we have this swing move, we have this consolidation. So looking at the DXY on the daily time frame, you should at one point expect prices to pull back to this trend line on the daily time frame, so you can take buys again, and you're combining this with this area right here. So there's a psychological level of 100,000 around there, and there's a trend line on the daily time frame. So those pivot points are set already. So at some point in time you should expect prices to pull back to an area like that for you to take buys again to the upside. But looking at this on the daily time frame is going to take time. So we can step down to the 8-hour time frame and we'll look at this. So same thing on the 8-hour time frame. You have this swing move on the 8-hour time frame. You had this consolidation, you had the pivot set. So looking at this on the 8-hour time frame, I'm expecting the DXY to move to the upside. So we're going to pay attention to what's happening. So you can use psychological levels and trend lines to see if this move to the upside is still going to hold, or we might be seeing some temporal sells before the move again to the upside. So looking at this on the 8-hour time frame, what levels am I watching? So currently price went through 105, which is this psychological level, and I'm expecting prices normally to probably, let's say, test 105 or continue moving all the way to 110. So that's just what I'm looking at in terms of psychological levels. If you had to put a trend line on this, you might see this on the 4-hour time frame. So something like this. So now this makes it really easy, and it makes it really easy for you to analyze. So look at the move on the 4-hour time frame. We had an impulse, we had a correction, we had an impulse, we had a correction. I was expecting prices to take off from this area and take out these highs so we could test 110. So currently price didn't do what I was expecting, so we had a breach of this area and we have price moving to the upside. So when you look at this, so I'm going to zoom in on this. I'll probably stay on the 4-hour time frame just because of the time and everything. When you zoom into an area like this, so we're looking at this piece of price action right now. So we had this impulsive move, we had a pullback, inability of prices to take out these highs, and we had price dropping out. So currently you can tell we have price trading outside the trend line. So looking at this on the 4-hour time frame, there's two possibilities I'm looking at right now, and I'm going to show you. So here's the first possibility. With this trend line here, there's a trend line here, you can put this. If price continues to respect this trend line, so let's say we get a pullback to an area like this. If this doesn't get validated, we could see prices moving again to the upside, taking out this area and testing 110 level, which is the next psychological level above this highs right here. So we could see price moving to the upside. If however price let's say price breaks out of this trend line, you get a pullback, we should expect prices to sell. I'm looking at this areas here, this low. If price takes out this low as well, then we could see prices testing this psychological level of 105. So I think it's pretty easy on the DXY, and it's straightforward. So this is what I'm looking at, and let's say we look at the 8-hour time frame real quick just to make sure. So looking at the 8-hour time frame, so yeah, so on the 8-hour time frame we have a massive move, and this is a thing for me. When you have a massive move like this, and this consolidation, pivot set and everything, you are expecting prices to continue its move to the upside, but price is going to give you temporal pullbacks before the move. Let's say it's going to give you temporal pullbacks or maybe consolidation. So you might see a pullback, you might see a consolidation, and then eventually you might see the move continuing again to the upside, because on this pair the buyers are still in control. So I'm going to take this out and just stay on the 4-hour time frame. So this is my take on the DXY, and this is how I'm going to look at the DXY coming into next week. So I'm paying attention to what's happening to this piece of price action right here. I'm paying attention to this. Let's put this way. So I'm paying attention to this piece of price action right here, and here's my take. Because we have a trend line here, we might see price pulling back to an area like this and taking off, so we can take out this area and get a test of 110. If we however get a breach of this area, a pullback, we could see prices testing 105 and prices testing an area like this. So I think the DXY currently, this point is very critical on the DXY, because what happens at this point is probably gonna have major impacts on the other pairs. So if we see a pullback to an area like this and price moving up, you could see sales coming in on most of the pairs, and if you see a break to the downside push and a continuation for these sales to the downside to test 105, you could see more buys on those other pairs. So I think the DXY is really at a critical point, and the reason I'm saying it's critical is because we had a breach of this area right here, and in as much as price is moving to the upside, we're still trading outside this trend line. So we're brushing off of that trend line, so you could see prices selling over any time. So that's my take on the DXY right there. Let's look at the first pair, and that's US30. So this is US30 on the daily time frame. Same principle. We'll look at the swing move. So you had the swing move, you had a pullback, consolidation, you have your pivot point set and everything. So right here you have the next swing move. You should normally expect US30 to sell off back to this pivot point for you to take the buys, but this is going to take so much time while you're looking at it on the daily time frame. So when you look at this piece of price action right here, you can dissect this on the 8-hour time frame and see what's actually happening. So on the 8-hour time frame, same principle. You have your move to the upside. So you had this massive consolidation, your pivot was set, and everything you have is a move to the upside. So price keeps pulling back to this pivot point. So you see there's a push to this pivot point, there's a push to this pivot point, and price takes off. Another pivot point, price takes off. So looking at US30 on the 8-hour time frame, I'm expecting a push to an area like this and for buyers to come in again. So that's it. It's very simple on US30. I didn't take these sales right here, so I was a little bit hesitant with the sales, and currently it's going to be very difficult for me to sell from an area like this, and the reason is simple. Selling at this point means I'm taking these sales at the worst price possible. So I'm going to avoid these sales and just wait for prices to come back to an area like this. Once I see the inability for prices to go through this pivot point, then I'll be looking for buys again to the upside. But I need the setup thing to happen. So there's a setup I'm looking for. Once I see the setup, then it's going to align with this trend line. It makes it very easy. So a simple question you can ask yourself is, Where is price currently trading at? So on US30, we had price testing the psychological level of 45,000. This on US30 is a perfect test of the psychological level, and you can see this inability for prices to take out this area, and currently you have prices moving to the downside. So normally, going off of the principle of psychological levels, I'll be expecting US30 to drop all the way to 40,000, but because we have this trend line right here, I'll be a little bit cautious about that. So once price gets to an area like this, I'll reanalyze this pair and see if I have a setup to attempt the buys again, and in a belief of these buys, then you might see the sells. So that's one possibility on the on US30. The next possibility could be price pulling back and selling all the way to 40,000. So there's this possibility for us to take the buys if price finds it difficult to go through the pivot point, but if it goes through the pivot point, then we could continue with the sells. So that's my take on US30, and we can look at this on the 4-hour time frame. And just so I'll show you what's happening on the 4-hour time frame. So look at this, you have this impulse, you have a correction, impulse, correction. Normally you should expect price to bounce off of an area like this and move to the upside. But because we had this violation on the 4-hour time frame, you can align this with what's happening on the 8-hour time frame. So on the 4-hour time frame, you have this area that was taken off. So you had this area that was taken off, which normally you should expect prices to buy from an area like this. So with this area being taken off, now the next area for me has to be the 8-hour trend line right here. So I'm expecting prices to push to an area like this, an inability to go through, then we're looking for buys again to the upside. So I think this is very simple, like this is easy and it's straightforward on US30. It's not as complicated as you might look at it. So it's a very easy strategy. Put your psychological levels, put your trend lines, and you start making sense of what's happening. So again, from the principle of psychological levels, inability to go through 45,000. We're expecting prices to drop all the way to 40,000, but there's a trend line we can work with on the 8-hour time frame. So if we see the sales coming to an area like this, we need to wait, pause a little bit, see if the sellers find it difficult to go through this trend line, understanding that this trend line from the 8-hour time frame has set the pivot point already. If price gets to an area like this, we could be looking for these impulsive buys to test 45,000, and an inability, you might see sales coming in. So that's how I'm looking at this pair. So I'm going to sit on my hands and wait because I'm not in on this sales already. So I'm just going to let this play out. Alright guys, let's look at NAS100. We'll look at the daily time frame again, same principle. What's happening on the daily time frame? You have your swing, you have your pullback consolidation thing, and you have the next move again. So that's the next swing move. Normally you should expect prices to pull back and you look for the buys. So this is going to take time, so you can step down to the 8-hour time frame. On the 8-hour time frame now, we're currently trading between 21,000 and 22,000. So when you look at this, I'm going to do this. So when you look at this right here, we're currently trading between 21,000 and 22,000. Price hasn't gotten to 22,000 yet. So we're still looking at this move, and there's still a possibility for price to react from an area like this and move to the upside. So you can look at this on lower time frames as well. So the first thing you ask yourself is, where is price currently trading at? So we have 22,000 and 21,000. So is there a trend line we can work with on the 8-hour time frame? We have this trend line on the 8-hour time frame. So if you're looking for buys off of what's happening on the 8-hour time frame, you should expect prices to pull back to an area like this. Then you can take the buys again to the upside. Now, while waiting for this to happen, you can look at a 4-hour time frame as well and ask yourself if there's something you can work with from the 4-hour time frame. So on the 4-hour time frame, you have this swing move, you have a pullback, and you have this move. So currently, price seems to be consolidating around an area like this. So if price keeps bouncing off of this area and it finds it difficult to go to the downside, then you could see prices testing 22,000. So I have my buys on NAS100, my stop loss is at break even, so my stop loss is around here, and I'm still holding this position on NAS100. So if we get a breach of this area, of this trend line on the 4-hour time frame, we might see a push to the upside and eventually price selling again to the downside. So what this is going to do is just aligning with what's happening on the 8-hour time frame. So on the 8-hour time frame, If you see this move on the 4-hour time frame getting violated, you get a test, you should expect prices coming back to this area on the 8-hour time frame. So it's pretty easy and it's straightforward. You don't have to complicate it. So that's what I'm looking at on NAS100. So I'm going to take this off, and we can look at the same thing on the S&P 500. So on the S&P 500, we're looking at this from the daily time frame as well. So let's look at this. You have your move on the daily time frame, you have a pullback, you have this swing move on the daily time frame. So with the S&P 500, normally you should expect prices to come back to an area like this, and you see price moving again to the upside. So that's what we're looking on the S&P 500. But this is on the daily time frame, and it takes time for this to play out on the daily time frame. So what you can do is step down to the 8-hour time frame. Once you step down to the 8-hour time frame, you can bring in the psychological levels, and you can use the trend line as well, just to make sense of what's happening. So on the 8-hour time frame, we had this move, we had a push, we had a consolidation thing. So once your pivot point is set and everything, you have the next move, which is your swing move on the 8-hour time frame. You should at one point expect prices to pull back to this trend line, and you see prices moving again to the upside. So this is what I'm looking on the 8-hour time frame. So looking at this on the 8-hour time frame, there's two things you can do. You can wait for these prices to come back to an area like this, and you take the buys, or you can step down to lower time frames, let's say the 4-hour time frame, and make sense of what's happening. So with price coming through this area of 6,000, this is a psychological level of 6,000. Price has a tendency of testing this area, let's say testing 6,000, and an inability for prices to go through this. You should expect the S&P to rise all the way to 6,500. So just going off of psychological levels, you can already have this directional bias thing. So I'm going to clean this, and I'll explain this one more time. So we had price coming all the way to 6,000. We had a reaction from the sellers, then buyers brought prices above 6,000. Now price is currently trading above 6,000. So an inability for the sellers to take prices below 6,000, you should see prices headed all the way to 6,500. Now, is there something you can use to combine the psychological level analysis thing, just to make more sense of it? So what you can use is a trend line. So we'll have this trend line from the 4-hour time frame right here, and this trend line is still intact, so nothing has happened to this trend line right now. So on this time frame, you had the swing, you had a consolidation, you have your next swing move. So looking at this on the 4-hour time frame, while waiting for this to align with what's happening on the 8-hour time frame, you can expect sales to come in, and then you take the buys again. So you're looking at this sales right here on the 4-hour time frame, you're looking at this psychological level right here, and you're looking at this trend line. So when you combine stuff like this, you're waiting for the setup to happen around an area like this. It's just more confidence, then you can take your buys from an area like that. So let's say we zoom into this area just to see what's happening to an area like this, and you can normally step down to the hourly time frame. So on the hourly time frame, you might see this violation happening already. So what this violation is telling you is, if this trend line on the hourly time frame is taken out, you should expect prices to sell, let's say to the 4-hour trend line, and then you expect buys from the 4-hour trend line. So currently I got stopped out on this buys on the S&P at break even, and that's fine, because now I'm just going to sit on my hands and watch what price is doing. So I'm going to zoom in at an area like this, and I'll look at this on lower time frames as well, on the hourly time frame. So I'm going to track this movement to the downside. If the sellers eventually decide to sell, I know there's a possibility for them to test this psychological level of 6,000. If we get a test of this psychological level of 6,000, combining this with this trend line thing around here, you could see prices moving again to the upside. So I'm just going to watch what's going to happen. You might see a push, and then you see price coming down, inability around this point, and I'm expecting buyers to move again to the upside. So that's my analysis on the S&P 500. So I'm just going to keep it simple. As I said, guys, I did the recording already, but the sound wasn't there, so I'm just trying to go real quick just to make sure I have something out this week as well. Alright guys, so this is an easy one on the S&P 500. So let's look at this again on the daily. All right, let's look at this on the daily. Yeah, this is an easy one. So I'm looking at 6,000. The psychological level is 6,000. The next area is 65,000. Stepping down to lower time frames, the 8-hour time frame, you can see what's happening clearly on the 8-hour time frame. So you have your impulse, pullback, impulse, pullback, pullback. So everything you see right now on the 8-hour time frame is a swing move. So if you take this out, normally you're expecting prices to come back to an area like this so you can buy, but then we have this area on the 4-hour time frame we need to pay attention to. Impulse, correction, swing move. You're waiting for prices to come back to this area, 6,000, trend line around there. Look for the setup that gives you those entries, and then you can take buys again all the way to 6,500. So that's the next swing move we're looking at on the S&P 500. All right guys, so that's it for the S&P 500, and let's look at gold real quick. So this is the daily time frame as well. So let's look at this and just understand the structure thing. Yeah, so you have this move right here, you have your correction thing or your consolidation, and price takes off for the next swing move. So once you have price setting this pivot points like this, all you have to wait on the daily time frame. If you trading off of the daily time frame, all you have to do is wait for prices to come back to an area like this, and then you can take the buys. On the daily time frame, this is going to take time, so now you can move to lower time frames and start piecing these things together. So on the 8-hour time frame, this is what I'm looking at. So where is price currently trading at? We have 3,000 and 2,500. Price went through 2,500, this area, so we might see price coming back to test this area and for prices to move again to the upside. So if price does something like this, then we're looking at this trend line on the 8-hour time frame. The pivot was set already, so if price comes back to an area like this, price is just coming back to the 8-hour time frame pivot point, the trend line, psychological level and everything, then you're looking for buys off of this area to 3,000. So let's look at this again. I'm going to zoom into an area like this just to make it easy. So what's currently happening, if you step down to the 4-hour time frame, what you're asking yourself is there a trend line on the 4-hour time frame that has gotten violated, that's giving you this sells to the downside? Because if you can tell on the 4-hour time frame there's a trend line that has gotten violated and there's a possibility for these sales to come in, all you have to do is wait for these sales to come in. Once you see this inability taking out this area, inability for those sales to go through an area like this, now you can look for the buys to take off this area, and we're headed all the way to 3,000. So let's clean this and step down to the 4-hour time frame, and this is it. So this is the trend line I was looking on the 4-hour time frame. I'm going to make this bigger as well. So we had this move on the 4-hour time frame, move like you had an impulse correction, and I was expecting prices to take off from an area like this to the upside. So we had this fail around this area, we had price moving to the downside, it breached of this trend line on the 4-hour time frame. So currently what you see on the 4-hour time frame is this inability from the buyers to move to the upside, so we're expecting prices again to move to the downside. So while expecting prices to move to the downside on the 4-hour time frame, I'm paying attention to what's happening as well on the 8-hour time frame. So if you put this on the 8-hour time frame and you have your trend line thing on the 8-hour time frame as well, impulse correction, swing move on the 8-hour time frame, you should at one point expect prices to come back to an area like this so you can take the buys. Looking at this area, looking at this psychological area as well, you might see this coming down, inability, and you take those buys. So on the 4-hour time frame, what you see is just a massive fail on this trend line. So you have your trend line thing on the 4-hour time frame, stuff like this, it gets broken out, buyer step in, there's this inability. I'm expecting prices to continue its move again to the downside, and then we'll take buys again to the upside. Alright guys, let me show you something on this pair. So you might see some difficulties on this pair from the sellers as well. So let's say you have this move to the upside, you have this, you have buyers attempting to move to the upside, and you had this inability, and I took these buys as well. So I had my buys around an area like this, and I was expecting this to take out this area so we could see prices moving to the upside. So this didn't happen. So if you look at this, just pay attention to this. You have this area right here, So you have this move, there's this consolidation and price moving to the upside. So in as much as we're having this inability for prices to go through this area, we might see prices facing some difficulty around an area like this. So this is a setup I don't like. So this is not a typical setup thing for me, but it's just a possibility. So you might see this difficulty around an area like this. You get a spike, push back up, and you see price moving again to the upside on gold. So I'm going to show you how personally how I'm going to use this to my advantage. So looking at this area right here, you have this move, consolidation, this move. So normally if we're trying to align this 4-hour time frame to the 8-hour time frame, we should expect a break of this area, a push, and then prices selling again to 2500. So it's going to align with the trend line on the 8-hour time frame and the cycle levels and stuff like that. So I'm going to use this area right here, this stuff right here, this trend line thing, just to watch what price is going to do. So if price finds it difficult to go through this area, you could expect this bias to come in again. However, if price breaks out of an area like this, you get a test and you could see prices selling off. So those are all possibilities right there, and I'm just going to sit on my hands and watch. So the only pair I have coming into next week that's still running is this, like the buys on NAS100. So the markets might open and this just takes me out, and that's fine. So back to gold. This is what I'm looking at on gold, and I've shown you guys already what I'm looking at on the DXY. So you need to pay attention to what's happening on the DXY, because if price takes out this area, you get a push, you get this area, we'll take this area out, and we're looking at 105. If price respects this area, you could see this moving again to the upside. We'll take this area out and we're headed all the way to 110. So a move like this on the DXY, let's say a move to the upside on the DXY, could be an indication for this guy to sell again to the downside. And if you see the DXY doing something else, so let's say you get the break on the DXY to move to the downside, taking out this area, you could see pairs like NAS100 testing this area of 22,000, and you could see, let's say, the S&P resume its move again to the upside. So these are all possibilities. So you might see this sell coming in ability, and you see the move again to the upside. So pay attention to what's happening on the DXY, and then look at these other pairs individually and try to make sense of it. Alright guys, I hope this helps you, and if you have any pairs you want me to analyze next week, just drop the pairs down in the comment section and I'll have a look at it. And guys, stay patient. Remember, this is a festive period. You might face a little bit of consolidations with most pairs, but it doesn't change the fact it's just price action, just giving you more data to work with, and you can still see good moves off of those consolidations. So pay attention to everything, stay calm, stay patient, and trade accordingly to your plan. Alright guys, thank you, see you during the next one. Bye for now.